In this video, I'm going to teach you how to answer the most asked accounts receivable interview questions and help you plan brilliant answers that will get you a job working in accounts receivable. So let's start with what you will learn from this video. Firstly, you will learn the answers to the most common questions that we see in accounts receivable interviews. Secondly, I'm going to show you how you can avoid common errors that will cost you the job, things that people say in interviews that ruin their chances of getting an accounts receivables job. I'm going to show you how you can answer some of the most common technical questions and make sure you got great answers to show off the technical knowledge you have, or show you the technical knowledge that you should have before your interview. I'm going to show you how you can show off your skills to help you get the job and really sell yourself. And lastly, I'm going to show you how you can fix gaps in your knowledge before interview. So what are the things you need to know? And if you don't know them, what do you need to do to make sure you have that knowledge? So we'll start with one question that is very likely to come up, and that is, can you describe your skills and experience with Excel or spreadsheets? The way you answer this will depend on what knowledge and experience you already have. And I'll show you how you can answer this if you have lots of knowledge and experience, and I'll also show you how you can answer this if you don't have that experience to actually keep your chance of getting the job high and maximize the strength of your answer. So if you have the experience, the things that you should mention and the things that you should know how to use are the formulae functions. You'll be able to write formulae in Excel. You should know how to use pivot tables. You should know how to filter data, and you should be able to perform reconciliation calculations. If you can do all those things, great. If not, these are things you need to learn. If you know them, make sure you mention all of those. And when the interviewer hears that list as an example of the things that you can do, they will be satisfied that you have the main skills that are required in this job. If you don't have these skills, my top tips are to firstly sign up for an online course so you can find easy, simple, free courses that will teach you how to do all of these. Just go to Google, type in free Excel course, and you will learn how to do all of this. You could learn how to do all of this in one day. And that means that when you go to your interview, you maybe don't have experience of doing it in the real world, but you can talk about the course that you did and list all of these functions as things you know how to do, and be prepared for follow-up questions about these to check that you really have that knowledge. So you must know that. If you want to go one step further, you could look at getting certified, so you can get a certification, so a certificate, and that will basically mean any interview you go to, you can waive your certificate and satisfy them that you have that skill. When you are preparing your actual answer, here is an example answer of what you could say. So start by agreeing with them. They've asked this question for a reason. They think it's important. Agree with them. So say, when working in accounts receivable, spreadsheet skills are extremely important. Then you need to explain clearly why you have all those skills. So you say, I have proficiency in the fundamentals of Excel, including skills such as performing calculations using formulae, creating spreadsheets, data analysis, using pivot tables, and I can perform reconciliations in Excel. So you're basically listing all of the key skills that they're going to need. And then the last thing you do is you have to back it up. So you could do option A, which is I can evidence these skills with a certification or talk about a course that you've completed. Or B, if you don't need to do a course, but you already know it, you say, previously in my career, I have used Excel too, and talk about all the things that you did in your past job that involved Excel. And when you structure your answer like this, you're showing off all the skills, or you're filling in the gaps in your skills by obtaining those skills. And by doing that, you will pass this question very successfully. Now let's look at the next question, which is, what bookkeeping software experience do you have? The approach that you will take to this question will be very similar to the previous question. And you have to think about your answer in terms of what is the strongest answer that you can give based on your experience. How do we make your answer as strong as you possibly can? So if you have loads of experience, you can have a great answer. If you don't have so much experience, how can you make your answer stronger? So this is basically a pyramid which shows the best answers at the top and the worst answer at the bottom. So the worst answer you could give is just say, I have no experience at all. I don't know anything at all. That is really going to be very, very negative. The way that you can improve it is to actually try and learn it. Have a go at it. Get some basic experience as far as you possibly can. The next best answer is to talk about using a very similar system. If you find out what system they use, that will be really helpful to you. And if you know a really similar bookkeeping software, and in fact, they're all very similar. If you know one, it's very easy to transition to the other. So talk about the system that you've used previously, talk about all the functions you can use, and then talk about how you're very confident that you can move from one system to another because they're all very, very similar. and it's just a case of learning a little bit of new skills, and that transition will be very quick. The best answer is, of course, to find out what program they use and to talk about the fact that you've got experience using the exact same program. So things you need to mention in your answer is what knowledge you have. So what can bookkeeping software do? Talk about the basic knowledge. If you don't have experience of either the system that they use or any system at all, you can practice. You can get a free trial of a lot of the basic bookkeeping software, perhaps not as good as a major company would use, but you can actually access a simple bookkeeping system on a free trial. You just sign up for 30 days and then cancel it, and you can actually play around with it, and that will give you something to talk about at your interview. Better answer would be talk about some actual real world experience. And the best answer is when you start talking about some advanced features, even if they're not things that you would actually use in accounts receivable, but they are things that are within the system, and it shows off that actually you have more knowledge than perhaps someone else applying for the job. So you can mention things like journal entries, any experience you have with payroll, accounting systems in there, or VAT, or sales tax, or all sorts of other functions that are available. And by going that route and getting as high up as you can on both of those diagrams, your answer gets stronger and stronger and stronger. The common accounting software and bookkeeping software that's out there is things like Sage Accounting, QuickBooks, Free Agent, Wave, and H&R Block also make various accounting packages. So find out, if you can, what software that they use, and then see if you can get a free trial of either that one or one very similar to make sure that you have something good to talk about in your interview. So get the strongest answer you can out of that, and you will do as well as you possibly can on this question. Let's move on to the next one, which is, what would you do if you issued an incorrect invoice? Now, this is very important. So you could have invoiced, say, 1,100 instead of 11,000, and that is a really big deal. And of course, that's going to have a big effect on the company's cash flow, and it needs to be dealt with. The first thing you say is that you will know the company's policy. Don't immediately start talking about what you did in your last job, because that might have a different policy. They may have authorized you to do more than you would be authorized to do here, or you may be expected to do much more independently at this firm than at your previous firm. So make sure you mention the importance of following the company's policy. You also have to have an awareness of the law. An invalid invoice is not very powerful in law. There is a lot of laws that state what must be contained in an invoice. So if you send out an incorrect invoice, that invoice is flawed. And so you have to be aware of that. You have to clearly record your mistakes. It doesn't sound like a very nice thing to do, to make a clear record of the fact you've done something wrong, but it's very important. You want to be honest and upfront about it, that any mistakes have to be shared, that they can't be kept secret, because one, they're going to be found out, and two, that's really, really dishonest to do it. The next thing you do is you have to raise it with line management. Managers do like to be made aware. They would rather be made aware of the fact that the invoice was sent out 40 seconds ago than the invoice was sent out a month earlier. Nobody did anything about it. Now the customer's paid the wrong amount of money and has to be chased for the correct amount of money, and someone very, very high up, like the chief financial officer of the company, is wondering where all this money's gone, and there's big forensic accounting going on to see if someone's stolen it, and it just gets into a complete mess. So make sure that people are immediately aware of it and that you act quickly. So get all these ideas in and discuss them at length, and you will be successful in this question. And now we can move on to another question that you want to be very well prepared for and you want to plan out, which is, can you tell me about your employment history? And when it comes to this question, you want to see this as an opportunity. A lot of candidates completely waste this question and don't use the opportunity to show off the skills and experience that they have. So make sure you make full use of this question. And you also want to be aware of what they're actually looking for. And what they want to see is some previous experience. If you don't have accounts receivable experience, you could have similar experience or experience that's going to be useful, and you want to make that link. They would like to see someone with some commercial awareness. They also want no evidence of problems. You don't want to talk about all these horrible fights you had at your previous companies. Now you fell out with everybody and it was a disaster and you got fired in a, rage. That's not what they want to hear. They are listening out for any hints of problems that you could be bringing to the company, because they don't want those. And so if there's no evidence of problems, some commercial awareness and some relevant previous experience, they're starting to think that actually you're a really good choice. Now, when you actually answer this question, you're going to do 4 things. Firstly, state your job title, and then go through every job title that you've had one at a time, following these 4 steps. State your roles and responsibilities. So what were you actually responsible for? What were you accountable for? What did you actually have to do that was your responsibility? Then, if you can, do some reassurance on exit. So when you're telling the story of how you went from one job to another, tell a positive story. Things like moving house with your partner, for example, is a great reason for moving a job, because you didn't have so much control over that. You are moving to a different place. You could have stayed at the same company, but things happen in your life and you moved. Or you could be moving for a promotion, or you could be moving for a new opportunity, but you really liked your previous job and they would take you back. These are nice things to say. And also make a link to accounts receivable. Every single job, you want to try and make a link. Even if it is a job like working in a restaurant, you can talk about customer service, dealing with people, working with people, that sort of thing. Simple links that you can make to build up a picture that you've got a wide variety of experience, all of which you're going to bring to this new role. So some tips for success: always leave on good terms. So if you've left on good terms between jobs, mention that. If you could return to your previous job, that's another good thing to mention. Always make clear links to accounts receivable. A lot of people just list their jobs. That's not very useful. Actually think about how it matches with accounts receivable and actually plan that out, and make special attention to all of the commercial experience. Anything you've done working in finance, working in a company, working with money, that is all good experience that you want to really, really highlight. So if you follow this procedure, you will score well on this question. The next question you want to be absolutely clear about is, what is the difference between accounts payable and accounts receivable? And if you don't know the difference, that is a problem. Make sure you know, because they're 2 very different jobs. So let's start with payable, and then we'll look at receivable. So payable is all to do with money leaving the business. So that's where you actually pay the invoice. This is to do with money that you owe. So payable is to do with money that the business owes, and it's all about managing the liabilities and making sure suppliers are paid. On the other hand, accounts receivable, which is what you are applying to, totally different. This is money being paid to you. You are collecting the money. You are sending out the invoice, actually ensuring that the money is actually collected. Remember, just sending out an invoice doesn't mean that it'll be paid. Some people pay late. You will be involved in chasing that. And you are actually generating a inflow for the company. You're bringing money into the business. So it's a really, really important role for a company. If accounts receivable isn't managed very well, the company will very quickly get into cash flow problems. So make sure you're clear on the difference. And when you give your answer, list all of those things on the correct column under receivables. Let's move on to the next one, which is, what is invoice discounting / factoring? The short answer is, it's a way of generating cash very quickly. So instead of waiting ages for invoices to be paid, you can use this method to generate cash, and it means the accounts receivable function is less of a strain on the business. The cash comes in a lot quicker. So let's run through the basic simplified process. So you send an invoice, then the factoring company, so usually a bank or other financial institution, will pay out very quickly. And so you can typically get 90% of the value of the invoice paid really, really quickly. And the key is that the cash gets paid quickly. So instead of having to wait for, say, 60 days or 90 days or 30 days or whatever terms are on that invoice, you get the money perhaps in 24 hours, sometimes even faster. The customer pays the factoring company, they don't pay you, and then the factoring company sends the remaining balance minus some fees to your company. So that way, the money comes in much, much faster. So learn that process, and if you're asked about it, just mention each box on the arrows, and then you will have a great answer. The next question that you want to be well prepared for is, why do you want to work as an accounts receivable clerk? Why do you actually want this job? And this is, of course, a very personal question, and one that you can only answer with what you believe. However, I'm going to show you some things that you could talk about and help you structure an answer with some great things to get in, and then you can personalize it to yourself. And I'm also going to show you the things that you absolutely must not mention, because they will get you into trouble and lower the chances of you getting the job. So you want to talk about good skills match, so talk about your previous experience, what things you like doing, what things you're good at, and link that to accounts receivable. Explain that this is a very essential role within a company. A lot of companies that are involved in invoicing, which is practically every single company, if they did not have a strong accounts receivable function, the company would collapse. It is extremely important that money owed to the business is paid. So you're actually in a really important role in the company. You can also talk about the company that you're applying to, make it really personal to that company, and explain why you want to work there. Why do you want to join this company? And be really positive and enthusiastic about it. And if you do those three things, you will have the basic structure of a great answer. Some things to be aware of as things you must not mention is it's quite a simple one. It's to say it's a very convenient location and here is easy to get to. Well, that suggests that maybe you just want to work here because it's convenient to you. They're not interested in that, and it comes across a little bit negative. They will mark you down for that. Simply saying that you need to earn some money or you need a job basically means you just applied for this because it was a job and you just want anything. That's not very positive. And any indication that you give that you plan to leave, you talk about accounts receivable as a stepping stone to something completely different. That's not very good. They want someone in there doing the accounts receivable job. And the time to talk about leaving a company isn't when you're being interviewed for a job. That is not the right moment. So stick with a positive arrow, avoid everything on the downward arrow, and you will be able to plan a good answer. The next question I want to talk about is the question that is, what makes a good accounts receivable clerk? And to answer this question, there is 6 words that I want you to use. And when you use each of these 6 words, just talk a bit about them. So you start with diligent. That means that you actually do your work accurately and you don't make mistakes. That is extremely important. You want the right invoices sent out to the right people. You have to be very efficient. You have to do things quickly, but also accurately. You have to be trustworthy. It's a very important function for the company, and you have to be trusted with what could be very large sums of money that you're dealing with. It's a very important job. You have to be super organized. You have to make sure that no invoices are missed, that all of the bills are sent out, because if you don't send a bill to a customer, you might never be paid for that. You have to be reliable. They have to trust that you're going to do it correctly and accurately. And also you have to be quite persistent. You have to be able to actually get this money into the company. So companies may not pay when they're supposed to, and you have to have the persistence to ensure that collections are followed through. And before we finish, here's some of the really good questions that you could ask. You could ask them to tell you more about the software that they use to manage the accounts receivable function. You could ask what you can do right now to be super well prepared for starting at the company, show you really, really care about doing a good job. You could ask about training in CPD to show that that is something that you value. You could also ask what they view as the ideal characteristics of a good accounts receivable employee. And if you ask that, you can engage in a conversation about how you meet the skills and requirements for the role. And lastly, one question you want to make up on the day based on what happens in the interview to show that you're listening and show you're engaging in a two-way conversation. So I hope this video was really helpful to you. I wish you the best of luck in your accounts receivable interview, and I would appreciate if you can post in the comments below what questions you were asked and if you got the job. And finally, thank you very much for watching.